And so the person that actually really is, well timed when he arrived on the scene in a significant way is someone that not only has Regulus at 29 degrees Leo, but that has Regulus at 29 degrees Leo rising. Like literally 29th degree of Leo is Donald Trump's rising degree. Okay, so I see him as the Regulus president who came in right after Regulus entered Virgo, and he represents that Regulus in Leo in a lot of ways, right? I mean, he comes in as a celebrity, like literally a celebrity. Like he's the first president to not have a political history or a military history. So he literally had a celebrity history, right? And so that's kind of what brought him in. But I see him as the disruptor. So I'm looking at him objectively. I'm not like for or against, just that objectively speaking, with Uranus on the North Node and the Sun, very much here to disrupt. He also has Mars on the ascendant, right on that Regulus. Okay, so his spiritual role was to disrupt something. What did he disrupt? Like I said before, 2016, that was, from the globalist perspective, they were supposed to have Hillary Clinton there. And this anti-globalist, this pro-right sovereign state, America First person comes in and ruins that globalist dream. And what was happening was interesting. The summer of 2016. So not only was he the Regulus president with 29 degrees Leo rising, but what happened was his progressed sun in the summer of 2016. So progressed sun moves about 1 degree a year. So he was born with the sun in Gemini, late Gemini here, and it moved 1 degree a year. And literally the summer of 2016, it not only crossed his ascendant, but across from Leo into Virgo. So literally symbolically went with the same movement of Regulus from Leo into Virgo. His progressed sun did the same thing while crossing that ascendant. So it's like the timing of him relative to the energy makes a whole lot of sense. It's astrologically appropriate that this energy would come in at that time, and it had a very successful effect at disrupting the globalist order and the whole what is anchored in essentially in the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. Okay, and so the next slide here is just I understand it's a male and a male and a female, but think about it. Doesn't matter what this is. The idea is being critical thinking is going to be very important for Saturn, Neptune, and Aries. Because we are entering this more sovereign discernment time period. So letting our emotions in our minds go in either extreme direction is very important to not do. And this is the result essentially of that Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012 that allowed for propaganda on the American public, right? It allowed for emotional manipulation. It allowed for, funding and things of that nature. So whether you're deranged by the idea of the Regulus president and the disruptor that he is, like in my opinion, he came in at the right time. He's the right energy for the right time. And it had to be disrupted because heading where we're headed now, it's not that he's the leader. We're going to create it. It's Saturn, Neptune, and Aries. So we are coming up with it as individuals. We're creating society from here on out. We're not being top-down led, okay? But someone had to get in the way of that, right? But so that's why you don't want to worship it either, right? Because worship, like seeing him as the hero, that it's the new direction we're heading, that's also false. Seeing him as like the evilest thing because you've been convinced by the globalists that you want the globalists, for it, like that their intentions are your best intentions, which aren't. Either side is wrong, is what I'm saying. The way I see him, again, this is not high value information. This is my opinion. This is Sloth. If you've seen the movie The Goonies, this is the scene where he's holding up the rock because this is, they found the pirate ship. The Fratellis are coming. The cave is collapsing, and so he holds up that rock to let the kids slide under his legs and go to safety. I kind of see, Trump as like using the sloth analogy, right? He's serving a purpose. He's one of the Fratellis, right? He's one of them, right? Again, he was a celebrity. He came in like with wealth and everything else. So he's kind of one of them. Like you see him with all the celebrities and whatnot, right? He's one of them. But in this instance, he's serving a purpose. He's holding up that rock, and it's the way for us to get out. But we're on our own. That's the idea. This is the necessary timing of where we're at now, instead of being under total control for, Agenda 2030, now we're going to enter a whole new world where we can figure it out ourselves. Okay. And that's so, like, he says a lot of things. Some things I agree with, and some things I don't, because, everyone's, in my opinion, you can have a nuanced opinion about everybody. But the most poignant thing he ever said, I feel like reflects his soul mission, which is reflected in his chart, and the timing of when he came in and everything, is he said, they're not after me, they're after you. And I just happen to be standing in their way. To me, that's like his spiritual mission, is literally doing the sloth analogy. He's in the way of what they intended for us. And now the globalist regime is falling apart, because now we're coming to the end of the Saturn-Neptune in Capricorn cycle. Okay. And, this is also showing, it's reminding that they all loved him at one time, until 2015, when he announced he was going to run for president, right? It's all public perception. He was a celebrity. He was a special guest on Oprah, The View. They loved him. Everybody loved him, right? He was even like probably the biggest financial and moral supporter of the 1988 Jesse Jackson campaign. Most people don't remember that. And that had more to do with Jesse Jackson being a New Yorker, right? It was more like New Yorker camaraderie than anything to do with politics. Okay. And that also speaks against the whole racist idea. He's portrayed as a racist, but why would you support, African American candidate if that was true? Anyway, a great quote from Malcolm X. The media is the most powerful entity on earth. And again, especially with the post, Smith Modernization Act in 2012, upping the ante on dividing us. Okay, they have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. They control the minds of the masses. And this is not to say, again, this is not to because obviously they try to make Trump out to be like the worst person in the world, mostly because he's anti-globalist. He's against their agenda. Okay, that doesn't make him the hero of the world either. Okay, it just makes what, if you're falling for either of that, then you're going to too much extremes and not having enough discernment. And what's interesting now, lately, it's again well-timed that we would see the disruptor be involved in, auditing the government, something that a lot of people have mentioned they were going to do before, like Obama, like Clinton mentioned, eliminating government waste and things like that. They never did it. They talked about it, they didn't do it. But it's always been something that's been popular, generally speaking. And what we found out now is that the mainstream media is well funded by what's called USAID. It's the Agency for International Development. It's a kind of a manipulative acronym because it sounds like it's aid, and there is some aid involved in it, but the vast majority of this is not going to aid. Okay, it is going to things like funding journalists, like funding politicians in other countries and things like that we want, that we favor and whatnot. But that's something that we found out. Okay, so that takes us now. Remember, I mentioned that the mRNA vaccine was, I don't even think it's really a vaccine. It's more of a therapy, in my opinion, because a vaccine would definitely prevent the spread and infection of a disease. And this obviously has not, even though we were lied to about it. Again, Neptune is in Pisces strong in 2020, 2021, around this time. But what also happened was we had doubling down of the Capricorn energy. So, Saturn and Neptune conjunct 1989 set the stage. But Saturn returned to Capricorn for the first time since 89. And then it joined Pluto in Capricorn at that time. Okay, so this is a really strong double whammy. I remember in 2019 looking at that conjunction coming up in 2020 and saying, oh boy, what are they going to do? Because it just felt like it was going to be a lot like a contraction energy. Okay. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I had no idea a virus is going to come and that they were to lock us all down. But, it turned out we had a virus, which was the catalyst to lock us down. Again, it was a doubling down on that Capricorn energy, that control energy. Okay. So you can almost think of it as just a means to an end, really. They were kind of testing, how far they could push us. So this takes that whole Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn and again, doubles it down. Okay. I mean, and then you add Neptune in Pisces. So there's a lot of foggy information happening. If you said anything about the virus coming from a lab in 2020 or 2021, you could lose your YouTube channel, for example. Now it's considered the likely source of the virus, right? That's just the way it is. The government overreach was insane, right? It was basically climate change policy on steroids. It's like, don't move. don't do anything, don't breathe, don't, and then it gave this excuse for experimental therapy known as mRNA, which again started with the beginning of the Saturn-Neptune cycle in Capricorn. Just after that, in 1990, that's when the patent was received by Pfizer. Now there was a reason to play with it. Just like, again, there was a reason to play with the nuclear weapons when those were invented. Now there's a reason to play with the mRNA technology. Now that it exists, it's the same thing with the atom bomb. And a lot of scholars say that Japan was about ready to surrender to Russia at the in the mid 1940s to end World War II, and then the U.S. went ahead and dropped bombs on them before that could happen. And I mean, honestly, it was we have a toy. We've never seen how we tested it over empty land. We've never seen how it actually affected a population, and that would be a great little experiment. And unfortunately, that's what happens, is when there's a toy, they will be played with. And the mRNA, I'm sure they wanted to play with. And they wanted an excuse to create something. And they told us, when that, so number one with the virus, it was like, first it was the masks, right? Don't wear a mask, save those for nurses and whatnot. And then 2 weeks later, wear a mask. And then 2 months later, wear 2 masks, right? And so there was just no consensus there. And now we come to find out, studies show that the mask did nothing to prevent you from getting sick. Yeah, they had some value in preventing yourself from spreading sickness if you're sick, which is why nurses and doctors wear them in surgery so they don't infect the patient. But the holes are too small to prevent yourself from basically receiving the virus. Okay, so there was no effect scientifically using high value information for the masks. We were told like all kinds of weird stuff with the virus, right? That you could be asymptomatic and spread it, that you could have no symptoms and it's just nonsense. The whole 6 feet apart was nonsense. That's what we're finding out now. And then when it comes to when in 2021, when the experimental injections came out, you were assured that if you take it, you can't get the virus. You can't spread the virus, right? And then if you don't take it, that you're at risk for death, like sure death, right? And none of that was really true. And what's interesting is that in the summer of 2020, as if they weren't already working on the book, the Great Reset came out. That was part of the World Economic Forum. That's Klaus Schwab. If you're not familiar, he actually he was ahead of the World Economic Forum for like 50 plus years, going back to the 70s. And he just resigned because they found out he's basically fraudulently using funds, getting high cost hotels and basically like using money in ways he's not supposed to with the World Economic Forum. So he's just stepping down now, which is very energetically, appropriate. Again, because Neptune has just exited Pisces. It's in Aries now. Again, we're coming to this close of the Saturn Neptune cycle in Capricorn. And so these big entities that are also funded a lot by those U.S. Agency for International Development funds are now suddenly going to get defunded. Okay. So we're witnessing literally the collapse of everything that was intended by the global corporatocracy, this globalist system that started with Saturn, Neptune, and Capricorn in 1989. Okay. And another interesting thing, going back to the whole CO2 thing. Okay. So this is Mauna Leo, the measurements. You can see that. Yeah. CO2 rise is been on the rise. This is the parts per million. Okay. So just from like 1960, it was at under 300. Now we're like a little over 420, right? It's been rising, but again, most of that is natural. We have a very small effect of that. And what proves that really is 2020, because with the lockdowns, it was pretty much worldwide lockdowns, right? There was a whole lot less CO2 emissions from humans, a whole lot less. But that just shows you how insignificant they are because there's no dip here. There is a natural dip and rise every single, like seasonally speaking, and that is because in the northern hemisphere kind of runs the show because it's most of the land mass is in the northern hemisphere. So when it's the springtime in the northern hemisphere and the plants come out, they suck up a lot of CO2 out of the atmosphere, so CO2 drops. When it's the fall and they drop their leaves, that's when CO2 will rise in the atmosphere. Okay, so CO2 rises in the atmosphere heading into winter in the northern hemisphere, and it falls heading into summer in the northern hemisphere. And so what we would expect to see if we had a significant amount, this is measuring the total atmospheric concentration of CO2. There's nothing to do with human emissions. This is just how it's rising. Again, due to the fact that we're toward the end of interglacial, it always spikes at the end of an interglacial, and it just shows that we're at the very end and we're about to glaciate again. But in 2020, there should have been a dip here, and then it should have continued to do its normal thing of going up, right? But there should have been a dip if we had a significant effect on this, but we don't. And we kind of showed that with the high value information, with a few graphs back there. But this reiterates that, because where's the signature of the massive reduction in human emissions? In fact, this shows how ridiculous any global policy would be to reduce CO2 emissions. So a Paris Climate Accord, for example, this shows how it would do nothing. Even if we had China and India not exempt, we would do nothing. Because in that case, we wouldn't be able to reduce CO2 like we did during the lockdowns. Okay. So just again, reiterates that point. Using, again, high value information. You got it right there in your face.